Have you ever played Risk of Rain? Oh, you have? Well then, Risk of Rain 2 might actually tickle your fancy. Risk of Rain 2 is just Risk of Rain with a 3D environment. And that's it. It's pretty much Risk of Rain but fully 3D. Yeah, that's all I've got for the script. Thanks for watching, bye! Sorry, I couldn't resist that. For anyone who's curious, Risk of Rain is a game where you go through various areas fighting a never-ending horde of monsters until you power up a teleporter and move on to the next area. Overall, it's a pretty basic plot, but the game itself is actually really fun. Originally in the first game, Risk of Rain was a 2D based pixel shooter with some rather awkward keyboard controls, using the arrow keys to move and then using other keys on the other side of the keyboard to shoot and use different abilities. It wasn't a bad game in fact, it was actually rather brilliant, but for me, two things really stopped me truly playing this non-stop. The controls being one of them obviously, but you were also very restricted in what you can and can't do. So after a while I started to quickly lose interest. I thought it was a great concept, but I think it was held back by the restraints of a 2D perspective. But then they announced the sequel and this time it was going to be in 3D. So obviously I kept my eye on it until randomly the game came out of nowhere on Steam for like £15 and you'd get 2 copies to give your copy to yourself and a copy to your friend. So obviously I picked it up and gave it a go. And within the first few minutes, I was immediately impressed. The game feels very familiar to anyone who's actually played the original Risk of Rain, and in fact it's more familiar than you'd expect. But it doesn't really matter as this is actually a really good sequel, and even for an early access title, it feels like a solid game already. So what is Risk of Rain 2, you might be asking? Well, Risk of Rain 2 is a 4-player co-op roguelike shooter where you and 3 friends crash land onto an alien planet with the ultimate goal being to escape the planet. However, with this being an early access title, I can't confirm if that endgame goal is even a thing yet, as I've never really seen it. Or rather, I suck that much so that I never get that far. With this being a roguelike shooter, you'll be fighting through various levels with at the moment being 5 different themings. A forest-like biome, a desert, a swamp, an arctic-like station, and then finally somewhere near a volcano. Some of these levels have a couple of different layouts to go with, making the run feel different each time, and sometimes you won't encounter all of these levels. Normally the pattern tends to change with the swamp and desert level swapping out, so you'll either see one of the two, but the other 3 you'll see constantly. But I do have one slight problem with one of the levels, and that's the swamp. The levels themselves aren't the problem, it's rather the main objective being a nightmare to find. So within each level to progress to the next world you need to find a teleporter that will charge up and send you to the next world, alongside spawning a boss you need to fight first. And again, that's fine, it's just like the first game. But due to the teleporter being a greyish colour and the swamp using dark colours, as it's well, a swamp, the teleporter ends up blending into the environment and becoming harder to see. I think in one run me and 2 friends actually ran past the teleporter several times trying to find it, when we actually spawned a few steps away from it. I think to make things easier on yourself, it might work to actually have the teleporter fit into the theming of the area, or perhaps make the teleporter a brighter colour. I would say adding a marker onto the HUD after being in the air for roughly 5 minutes might be a good idea, but at the same time that might be pushing it a bit. So that's the basis of the game. You go through worlds and kill various things and teleport out. At the moment there's about 4 worlds you'll end up looping back around, fighting through another 4 worlds before looping again. And that does sound rather basic, doesn't it? Well, that's because it is. The game has a rather basic formula set in place, and for what it is, it works really well. But if that was all the game had to offer, then obviously this game would be pretty dull. But there's actually a lot more detail within the gameplay itself that keeps the game feeling fresh and fun. So within the game currently you have a choice of 6 different characters to play as, with the first being unlocked from the get-go. He's a rather basic character with a ranged weapon, a basic dodge roll, rapid fire and another attack that can pass for enemies. Again, he's more like a generic character, but the other 5 you unlock are rather unique and rather fun to play with. The other characters include an archer who's personally my favourite. She's quick, she has a bow that you can fire while running, and it also locks onto enemies. She also has an ability to spam a ton of arrows in a certain area, a short range teleport ability for a dodge, and a throwable that bounces back between various enemies. At first her bow is rather slow, but you can change that and we'll come back to that later. The other characters you have are an engineer who has 2 turrets that can be placed around dealing most damage for you, some mines and a grenade launcher, but instead of a dodge mechanic you can place a temporary shield bubble down for you and your team. Next we have a robot that has 2 different weapons, one being a sort of railgun. It's slow to charge at first, but it does deal a ton of damage. Alongside that you always have the option to use an auto nail gun that works similar to the style of a minigun with a charger but rather inaccurate output. But what's great about this robot is his name is Multi, like a multi-tool. Alright, it's nothing special, fuck off. There are 2 more characters who I still need to unlock, as all unlockable characters need to be unlocked by completing some kind of requirement, with the previous characters being unlocked by just playing the game over time. The other 2, however, require a little bit more. One of them requires you to sacrifice your life at a certain point in the game, while another requires you to find a certain amount of lunar coins that can drop from enemies randomly. Besides unlocking these characters though, these lunar coins can be used for specific situations, giving you a chance to buy specific items from these plant-like figures scattered around the map, or if you find the blue teleporter, you can be taken to a store that kind of works like a pit stop between the areas, where you can browse around for various items that can either once again be purchased with lunar coins, or some that can be bought by trading in other items as well. Throughout the main game you'll find chests scattered around everywhere, which can be opened by using money you'll gain from killing enemies throughout the area, as upon leaving a zone your money will be reset back to 0. Not only that, you'll also find deployable turrets, health drones, and even some altars that you can give money to in a chance to get an item, but most times you just get nothing. Thankfully with chests you're always guaranteed an item, and these items will affect your overall stats of the character alongside adding some benefits to the player as well, and these can vary from shooting off fireworks whenever you interact with something, to a phantom arm appearing out of your shoulder and shooting phantom daggers at random enemies after each kill. Also you'll find pods around the area that will give you an option of 3 different items, with some often being random picks regardless, but besides that you'll also find an equipment chest that will give you a usable item which will recharge over time. With most characters you'll only be able to hold one of these, but with multi you'll actually be able to hold 2, and again these items will obviously vary, with one providing health back, another that you can call friendly AI to help you, or an item that can unleash hell. Similar to the characters in this game, various items won't be available at first, and you actually need to do various things to unlock them. Some again could be rather simple, just needing you to get so far into a run, whilst others might be a little bit more complex to unlock. For example, there's a really powerful item you can get, but you need to get to a timed chest in the 3rd area within 10 minutes. And honestly, I really love this idea. Not only does it give more variety and keep the game fresh on each run, having these new items that unlocked with a rather bizarre requirement actually shows how dedicated you are to the game. And best of all, if you get one of these items and you're playing online with your friends, then all of them can use it while you're in that game. One other thing I want to point out which I love about these items is the attention to detail of each item, as they all have rather unique designs, but whatever item you actually pick up will actually show on your character in game as a cosmetic change. It's such a tiny little tweak, but after you've got like 20 items you go from a small looking survivor to a bloody space marine, and a lot of games don't really tend to go that far when it comes to detail on characters, so I think the devs deserve a lot of praise in that area. So with all that said, you still might be thinking this sounds a bit easy, especially if you can get all the items to buff your character over time, and yeah, you're right, but I would have hoped that you'd expect the game to be prepared for this, as it is. When you start the game you get an option of changing the difficulty from easy to medium and obviously hard, but you might as well fucking ignore that, because in game at the top right you'll also have a timer. Not only does this timer record how long your run is, as the time goes higher so does the difficulty. So regardless of what option you chose at the start, you'll always start with an easy difficulty with that base difficulty in mind, but over time it will get progressively harder, with each difficulty going from the standard formula to the game becoming sentient, to fully just mocking you, and then with the final difficulty with the game just laughing at you. Now there possibly could be one other difficulty after Tidus's laugh, but after a while the game just ramps up from being slightly challenging to a complete clusterfuck, especially if you've been in a round for over an hour. Yeah, some of these games can last a real long time, but I'm perfectly fine with that. Even after an hour-long game and I've just died and lost everything, I still just want to jump straight back into it and go with another character and try again. So yeah, honestly, I don't have a lot of negative points to go with this game. For an early access title that's just come out of nowhere, the current stuff we have so far is honestly really good. I guess if I had to be nitpicky and wanted to request anything, then it would probably be the features from the first game, like modifiers, restrictions to stop people hoarding items, and perhaps the option to change the colour palette of each character, just to make them a little bit unique to each player. But overall, would I recommend Risk of Rain 2? Do you seriously need me to answer that question? Yes, I would in a heartbeat. Seriously, this game is like 15 quid on Steam, it's really cheap and it's very good for what it is. Just stop watching the video and go buy it. If you're still here, I'm serious, fuck off, and go buy the game. That's it, we're done, goodbye.